The frantic snap of the nylon lines was a sound I'll never forget. It was sharp, definitive, the sound of a carefully built life unraveling in seconds. How could anyone be so malicious? 1 minute. The Serenity, my grandfather's prized vessel, was swaying gently in the harbor, a testament to decades of love and elbow grease. The next, she was a helpless castaway, pushed by the wind and current toward the rocky shallows. Oh, for heaven's sake, look at that thing go. A voice dripped with saccharine cruelty. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw her. Doris, our HOA president. She stood on the dock, hands on her hips, her smile as cold and sharp as the shears she'd just used. It's an eyesore, a blight on our community's aesthetic. I warned you about the peeling paint, didn't I? The paperwork was filed. You just didn't listen. I took a breath, the air thick with the smell of lake water and petty tyranny. This wasn't just about a boat. This was about Doris and her relentless crusade against anything that didn't fit her perfect, sanitized vision of our neighborhood. She saw my boat, a rustic piece of family history, as a personal affront. My grandmother, Clara, stood beside me, trembling. Doris, please. That's our home. Clara's voice was a soft whisper, but it cut through the air. Doris's laugh was a shrill, piercing sound that bounced off the still water. It's a rusty old tub. Clara, we have standards here. The sheer audacity, the lack of empathy, it was breathtaking. I looked at my grandmother, at the tears welling in her eyes, and a quiet, simmering rage began to boil inside me. I was done with her threats, her fines, her condescending tone. This time, she had gone too far. The confrontation was swift. Clara was sobbing, pointing a shaky finger at Doris, who simply stared back with a smug expression. Don't you dare? I growled, my voice low. Don't you dare touch another thing of ours. The rage was a tangible heat in my chest, a fire I hadn't felt since my grandfather passed away. I have everything on video. Doris, the motion-activated camera I installed right there. I pointed a finger at a discreetly placed camera on our dock post. The smugness on Doris's face faltered, just for a split second. A single, audible gasp. But she recovered quickly, her lips curling into a tight, thin line. You think a little camera can stand up to the HOA? I have the board behind me. Young man, I am the HOA. Her words were meant to be a final, crushing blow. But they were just air. I had something she didn't, proof. The next few days were a blur of police reports, insurance claims, and legal advice. My grandfather's boat was recovered, but the damage was extensive. The hull had been gashed, the propeller bent, the water had seeped in and warped some of the floorboards. The financial blow was devastating, and the emotional toll was even greater. Clara would just sit on the edge of the dock, staring at the scarred vessel, her silent grief more powerful than any loud protest. It was at this point that a new player entered the scene. Mark, a quiet, unassuming man who lived 3 doors down, came over with a tray of fresh-baked cookies. I saw what she did. From my window, he said softly, avoiding my eyes. I have something that might help. He pulled out his phone, and on the screen was a video, from a different angle, of Doris not just cutting the ropes, but kicking the boat away from the dock with a cruel smile on her face. A subtle but important detail, the intent wasn't just to disconnect. It was to harm. Mark's video became the crucial second piece of evidence. He, a victim of Doris's microaggressions himself, had decided to fight back in his own silent way. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was a communal battle against a bully. The legal proceedings were brutal, a tense showdown that felt more like a circus than a courtroom. Doris's lawyer, a slick-haired man in a suit 2 sizes too small, painted her as a community hero, a diligent leader simply enforcing the rules. He framed my grandfather's boat as a public menace, a safety hazard. I felt my knuckles whiten as he twisted the facts, his voice booming with feigned indignation. He even tried to discredit my video, claiming it was doctored. But then, it was Mark's turn. With a quiet confidence, He presented his own footage, shot from a different perspective, showing Doris's deliberate, forceful kick. The air in the courtroom shifted. The judge, a stoic woman with a sharp gaze, leaned forward. She could see the truth in that unedited, raw footage. The smug mask on Doris's face began to crack. Her hands, which had been clasped so primly on the table, started to tremble. The climax was a devastating cross-examination. My lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Sarah, started with a simple question. Mrs. Finch, did you consider the possibility that a boat set adrift on a busy lake could cause a serious accident? Doris's response was a stammering mess. She tried to deflect, to talk about bylaws and regulations. But Sarah kept bringing it back to the human cost, the potential for disaster. What if a child had been on that boat? What if another vessel had hit it in the dark? With each question, Doris's carefully constructed facade chipped away. Her voice grew higher, more frantic. The courtroom held its collective breath. I was just doing my job, she finally squeaked, her face red and blotchy. A single tear escaped and slid down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of remorse. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated self-pity. Your job was to cut a man's boat loose. A man who is no longer here to defend his legacy. Sarah's voice was a whip crack. The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken grief and anger. Doris finally broke. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Not for my grandmother or me. Not for the boat. But for her own perfect world shattering around her. The sound was not the loud, dramatic wail you hear in movies, but a quiet, broken little whimper. The sound of a tyrant finally losing her grip. I looked at Clara, who was holding my hand. Her eyes were still full of sadness, but a tiny spark of relief had ignited within them. In the end, the judge's verdict was clear. Not only was Doris found guilty of property damage, but the charge was elevated to a felony due to the recklessness and potential for harm. She was ordered to pay for all repairs, as well as significant damages, and was permanently banned from holding any position in the HOA. The community, it turned out, had been holding its breath for a long time. People who had been silent for years now came forward, sharing stories of Doris's bullying and abuse of power. The dominoes had finally fallen. We had our justice, and the neighborhood had its peace back. The story of the Serenity became a local legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the resilience of a community. The boat was repaired and now sits proudly in the water, a little scarred, but stronger than ever. The wooden sign on our dock now has a new message, a quiet testament to the battle we won. But the question lingers in my mind. Was this justice? Or just revenge? And where is the line between the two?